What's up everybody? This video is sponsored by RAYCON, but more on that later. First, I'd like to thank all of the patrons. I really do appreciate you guys. As you know, anybody who's interested in joining the Patreon group, there are incentives like I do deep dives, I've done kickflips, I've done heel flips, I do a monthly Q&A, and a lot of the videos go up on the Patreon first. And some of the videos go up on the Patreon and don't even end up making it to this YouTube channel for one reason or another. Also, I give out first dibs on new collage gear. We do have some new deck graphics that are coming, so the patrons will get an opportunity to purchase those at a discount a great deal of time, or a good deal of time, before everyone else. And for everyone in the top tier, I give a half an hour video lesson once a month. So if you guys are interested in that stuff, consider joining the Patreon group. Before I get into the video, one more thing. I want to shout out Theeve. Theeve makes amazing US made gear. They are one of the best clothing manufacturers I've ever dealt with, for the simple fact that their clothing lasts. I don't ask for clothes very often from Theeve. This shirt I've probably had for like 3 seasons. I've skated in it. I tend to just wear it now because I don't want to wash it too much and have to end up getting rid of it. So I don't skate this particular shirt as much. And that happens with a lot of their gear. I'll skate it a lot in the beginning, and then, you know, when you skate your clothes, I sweat a whole lot and that tears the clothes up, and I have to wash them all the time. And so when you fall in love with a piece of clothing like I have with this flannel, you don't want to wash it, so you don't end up skating in it as much. So yeah, if you do get some Theeve clothing, that is a risk. Now, they're not sponsoring this video, but they are a sponsor of mine. And highlighting people who support me is something that I'm going to start to do a lot more often on this channel, because I've neglected to do that a bit. And yeah, I really do appreciate their support. All the Theeve gear is made in the US. It's all extremely sturdy and well made, and it can stand up to skating. It can also stand up to a lot of work, mechanic work, you know, blue collar stuff, because their clothes really are made well. So check out Theeve. I'll flash their website here on the screen and leave a link down in the description. So today's video is one that gave me a whole lot of anxiety for a long time, and that is impossibles. Now, why did making a video on impossibles give me anxiety? It's a trick that I learned fairly early on. In fact, I think I learned how to impossible right after I learned how to tray flip. And the motions are linked, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the thing is, it's such a unique trick in its execution that explaining it in detail, the way I like to explain all of the tricks that I tackle on this channel, it posed a significant challenge. Now, I used to do this trick a lot, and in fact, I even did it down like a 9-stair in my mag-minute video part way back in 2008, I believe it was. I used to do them to no slides and 50-50s, but I kind of stopped doing them. And I'll be honest with you, I kind of stopped doing them when Dylan Reeder was having his big moment, because he did them often and he did them so well that I just felt like there was no reason for me to really be doing impossibles. And you know, when you're in a skate career, when you're skating, you're putting out videos, you're shooting photos, you're trying to get photo incentive, and you're working towards building up your career. And that's something that these are considerations that you have to make. There are other tricks that I won't get into now that I stopped doing for whatever reason, because I wanted to highlight other tricks that maybe I felt represented me better, looked better with my body doing them. There are things you have to consider during a professional career that you don't have to consider when you're just skating to have fun. So I put the impossibles on the back burner, and I didn't restart doing them until very recently, because I got 3 or 4 comments asking me to tackle impossibles. And so for months now, I've been just doing impossibles all the time, and thinking about the process of doing them, thinking about what makes me successful at doing them. And I have some takeaways, so now I'm making the video on them. So first off, let's get through the prerequisites for an impossible. Now, obviously, You need to be at the point where you're ollieing rolling. Obviously, you should be doing some flip tricks. Now, it's not necessary for you to be able to kick flip or heel flip to do an impossible. And the reason for that is that your front foot doesn't have very much involvement in the execution of the trick. There is some involvement, but it's not the same. Usually with flip tricks, there is a play between your back and your front foot. A little bit of a dance, will you? And there is a bit of a dance here with this trick, but it's different because you're not sliding with your front foot and you're not catching with your front foot because there is no catch that's necessary. So I will give you one that'll be a little interesting, the no comply, the step hop. If you're able to do a step hop and if you're able to create the illusion that you're stepping and popping is one movement, because it really is an illusion, you're never really doing it in one motion. You're always stepping off and then popping your tail and using your knee to slide the board forward. But the more you do it, the more fluid the motion becomes, the more you're able to create that illusion. So if you are adept at creating that illusion, you'll have an easier time with impossibles for the simple fact that your front foot, it's going to apply some pressure to the board while you're rolling and as you're squatting. And then as soon as you get into the scooping portion of the trick, your goal is to lift your front foot off the board and out of the way. And this is very similar to the motion of the step hop. So if you're good at that step hop, no comply, whatever you want to call it, it'll help you out with your impossibles. The other tricks that I recommend you know how to do, and this is why the kickflip thing is a little weird, is a tray flip. If you can tray flip, you're going to be a step closer to doing an impossible successfully, and this is simply due to the back foot motion. They're very similar back foot motions, and also keeping the pressure on your front foot to allow you to start that scooping motion with your back foot. That's the thing where tray flips and impossibles are exactly the same. I apply the same pressure to my front leg, and I use the same motion when I start my scoop. That's where the similarities end for those though. Now, the other thing that I recommend is that you're able to pressure flip. And that's because I said this before in another video. The pressure flip scoop and the tray flip scoop and the impossible scoop are very similar. They do have their own differences. However, if you're able to do that pressure flip, it's going to make it easier for you to do the tray flip and also the impossible. Now, one more thing that I'll mention before I go into my breakdown of how to do the trick is your trucks, right? I skate medium trucks. Now, when I learned this trick and when I learned all of my tricks, I skated tight trucks. Pretty much everyone skated tighter trucks back when I was learning to skate in the 90s. And even in the early 2000s when I was learning the bulk of my other tricks. I did switch to loose trucks, extremely loose trucks, like put them on and don't touch them, and completely wheel biting all the time if I didn't keep my balance. But let me get into this. I ran into this the other day with one of my students. I was teaching him how to tray flip, and he had loosened his trucks up quite a bit because kids at the skate park, other kids who I pressed him for answers to see if they were actually good skaters, and they weren't. But he listened to them because of peer pressure, and they're telling him, you got to loosen up your trucks. Your style is tight because your trucks are tight, which is asinine. You develop a style in any physical activity when you're able to express yourself freely. You're able to express yourself freely when you develop a certain amount of mastery. Because the way you express yourself, the way you're able to move your body, your physicality, the muscle memory that you develop is all going to change, and it's going to lead to your style changing. Similarly to how you would with a musical instrument, right? If you're playing the flute, in the beginning, you struggle to get the embouchure down. The same with a trumpet or anything. You're struggling with the fingerings and moving through those fingerings. You're struggling on the guitar to chord, to arpeggiate, to solo, right? A mode. But once those become a part of your memory, and once you're able to do these things without thinking about it, then you can express yourself and move freely between these things. Skateboarding is no different. If you're a beginner and you don't know how to do tricks, that means you don't know how to stabilize a skateboard when you're bending your knees and coming up, so you're going to wheel bite on the way down. That also means for tricks like tray flips, for tricks like impossibles and pressure flips, you have a lack of resistance from the skateboard. So pressure is a function of the resistance, and that resistance is needed for you to create that pressure and make the board flip. And you're probably struggling because of that, because you're trying to follow what an expert does when you're a beginner. You're not capable of accurately replicating the movements of an expert when you're a beginner. If your trucks are extremely loose, you're going to struggle to learn this trick. Thank you, RAYCON, for sending over your everyday earbuds and sponsoring this video. Now, these earbuds are pretty impressive to me. They have 8 hours of battery life and 32 hours in the charging case. They're water resistant and they have passive noise isolation. They also cost about half the price of their competitors. I use them to help me learn this nollie heel flip nose slide 270. I went to the park. It was a little bit windy that day. There were other people skating and I didn't want to be bothered by anything in the background. So I popped the earbuds in, did a few tricks to warm up, and within a half an hour, I had landed my new trick. I do have a little bit more spinning to go before I take it to the streets, but the earbuds did help, and if you're interested in trying them for yourself, use my code Norman15 for a 15% discount. I'm gonna keep using these in the future because they really are great. Thank you, RAYCON. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of the trick. I place my back foot across the tail of the board. So I talked about in my tray flip video how, let's say this is the orientation of the skateboard, my back foot would be slightly turned. I don't do that for the impossible. My entire back foot is going to be across the tail of the board. Now, my big toe on my back foot is going to be right in that corner of, in that section of the board in between the bolts and the end of the tail pitching, right? So the ditch of the tail. My toes are going to be slightly hanging off of the tail so that I can kind of mimic that fingers grabbing the edge of the tail motion that I talked about in my tray flip video. My front foot, since my goal is going to be to lift my front foot off of the board and out of the way as soon as I start to scoop, my front foot is going to be very far up the board. I'm talking covering the first 2 bolts. So the 2 bolts on the front bolts of the skateboard, the 2 that are the closest to the tail. My front foot's going to be covering those. And I'm going to have just past the ball of my foot, so basically only my toes on the front of the board. And that is also because I'm trying to lift my front foot up off of the board as soon as I begin to scoop. So I'm going to crouch down and we'll go through a couple of things posture-wise. So in my heel flip video, I said that heel flip is one of the only tricks where I will allow my back to lean forward a bit more than is ideal for most tricks. Impossible is another one of these tricks. And the reason for this is it helps me keep constant pressure on the board and it helps me not get off balance. Since my front foot, I only basically have the tip of my toes on the board, it's hard to stay balanced if my back is back here. I have my back a little bit forward to help with the pressure. And since this trick relies solely on pressure, it's very important that you get the pressure right. And you're going to have to play around with this yourself because your body is different from mine. Once my feet are in position, I'm going to squat. And I'm going to squat down as low as I can before popping. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can do this. So, if you want to have a better looking impossible, right, you are going to rise less before you start the scoop. If you want to have a higher impossible, you are going to start to stand up, and about here with your legs is where you're going to want to have the scoop. So, again, you're going to squat. If you want your impossible to wrap around your foot harder, then I would recommend starting your scoop about here. If you want your impossible to be higher, I recommend starting your scoop when your legs are about here. This is just what works for me. Your mileage may vary. I've done a bunch of these over the past month or 2. I've watched videos of them over and over and over and over, and this is what I've noticed. So this is the advice that I'm going to give you. Now, Once you're ready to start the scoop, similar to the pressure flip and the tray flip, you're going to grab with your back foot and you're going to push the board into the ground in that pressure flip motion. And then you're going to, with your ankle, start to fling your back foot back in a pulling motion so that you're pulling the tail. And a lot of the misconception is that you want to only push the board forward with this trick, but it's not really going to work if you do that. You need the edge of the tail to create the lifting of the board off of the ground. So you're going to sweep your back foot towards your butt at the same time. And then you're going to push it forward and up. Now, as soon as your tail makes contact with the ground, you're going to lift your front foot up and then pull it back out of the way of the board. If you fail to get your front foot away from the board, it's gonna hit the board and knock it back to the ground. And I struggled with this a whole lot in the beginning. It takes a lot of practice. That's why I said the no comply step hop. If you're able to do that, you'll have a much easier time landing your impossible. So you might wanna work on those. Now, you're going to try to follow through with your back foot with the board to a certain point. So, and you'll be able to feel it. Once you get to a certain point of your scoop, you're gonna feel that the board will just keep rotating and you don't have to keep following through. So then you're gonna bring your back foot back to the flat position. Now you're looking at your board the whole time, and as you've scooped, you've lifted your knees up toward your chest. And when the board starts to flatten out, you're gonna put your front foot back onto the board. Now, you're gonna wait for gravity to push you to the ground ideally, and then you're gonna crouch back down when you land. So, let me give you a little tip. My back foot tends to kick towards my front foot. So, if you're once you're able to, once you've done enough of these, you'll be able to realize what's happening and kind of move your foot back once the board's flattened. But it's going to be hard to do that. You're going to land with your feet pretty close together. And I'll give you an example. There was an old Gravis footwear video of Dylan Reeder. It was all in black and white, I believe, but his shoes were kept red. It was a red, I think maybe one of his pro models of the Gravis. I don't know, that was a long time ago, probably 2010. And when he does the impossible, his feet kind of kick together almost. That's because he did a really high one. And to get it higher, your legs are lifted up more by the time you pop. And then when you're pulling your knees to your chest and following through, your feet tend to come closer together. But this is going to happen. This is normal. And the only way that you're going to get rid of that feet coming together thing is when you've done a lot of these and you have the presence of mind to just move your foot back a little bit more. Because to make the wrap happen, you kind of pull your foot forward fast. So you're pushing down, pulling back, scooping, and then pulling forward. And that's what creates that force. Now you have to have the right amount of pressure on your front foot as you start the scoop so that this pressure resisting what's happening with the back foot allows that scoop to happen, right? So it is a real dance of pressure between your feet. And you're going to have to figure out what works best for you depending on your height, depending on your weight, depending on the size of your board. I learned impossibles on a 7.75 board, so it wasn't very difficult for me to learn. However, I did notice that as my board got wider over the years, eventually to the 8.5 that I ride now, every time my board got bigger, there was a little bit of an adjustment that I had to make the trick work. Now, that's all I have for this trick. I believe I've gone over everything necessary. And if you follow those steps, you should be able to land an impossible. I am not the impossible expert. I've only started to do this trick again frequently recently, and it was only so that I could bring it to you guys and help everyone who's asked about this trick in the comments. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope you're able to get out there and land your impossibles. And thank you for watching. Check out clubdist.com. Pick up one of my collage skateboards if you'd like to show some support. That's www.clubdist.com. You can go to the collage website. We have a few boards up there, but most of that stuff it's out of stock, and we're not going to be remaking them. Someone reached out about the Sammy Baptista collaboration board. That was a one-off board. We're unfortunately not going to be making any of those. They're going to remain out of stock. Sammy, I believe, is having, you know, a one-off Shorties Pro model made again, so he's over there. So yeah, we're not going to be making it again. Everyone who got one got one. Sorry about that, guys. But yeah, go to clubdisc.com if you want to pick up one of those collage skateboards. And don't forget to check out Devium, because they make awesome clothes. They're well made. They stand up to the stresses of skating and whatever else you can throw at them in life. Thank you for hooking me up, Devium. Hope you guys land some impossibles. Peace.